Hey everybody, it's Justin Gross with Hop to the Top. Today I want to talk to you about the law of diminishing returns when it comes to PPC, and also touch on a little bit of our intake process and some of the questions that you need to ask when you're first starting a new PPC campaign. It could be a new one, or you could be taking over an existing one. Either way, you need to ask these questions. Keeping in mind that not only are you operating as a PPC expert, you have to also become a marketer. If you're not thinking and talking like a marketer to your client, you're kind of missing the boat a little bit. You really have to, put on also your marketing hat in addition to your PPC hat. Because a good PPC campaign it's not just about knowing the system and how to work the system, which is very important, by the way. It's also about understanding marketing and how to make a client campaign as successful as possible. So what you want to ask, there's a couple things you want to ask. First is, geographically, you need to talk to the client about their geo-targeting. And specifically, you don't want to just ask, where do you want to target, Mr. Client? Because the client, a lot of times, more often than not, they're going to get a little overzealous and they're going to think, well, I want to maximize this. I want to get as much coverage as I possibly can for my budget. They know what the number is that they're going to commit, and they may think it's false thinking, but they may think that it benefits them to talk about a wider net when it actually doesn't. So you have to coach the client and talk to them about specifically what areas historically generate the most revenue for them, and then you want to go from there. You want to address the low-hanging fruit, because the PPC is going to be the most successful when you're targeting those areas that historically have worked for that business in other advertising channels, and just as a whole, as a business as a whole. If you're all of a sudden coming in with a PPC campaign and you're targeting areas where there's already a diminishing return because that area is in further proximity from the business, or it's a product and service where there's a lower market demand, or that business isn't positioned well to convert that customer on that specific product or service, maybe because of either price or the offer of the product itself, there's probably a reason why the business sells more of certain products and services and less of others. There's a reason why they sell more within one area and less in another area. A lot of times there's a legitimate reason for that, and PPC isn't necessarily going to change the market, so to speak. Meaning, let's talk about geography for a minute. Let's say it's a local business. Let's say it's a plumber in Fort Lauderdale. That plumber probably works with businesses or companies or individuals, residential, commercial customers in Fort Lauderdale, maybe in close proximity, maybe within a few miles. Maybe they go through in and out of different areas of Broward County. Maybe once in a while they dip into northern Miami-Dade County or what have you, or go within 10 miles or so from their business. But they're not, unless it's a very specific project that maybe somehow they bid on, a commercial project or something of that nature, for residential jobs, a plumbing company or the typical home service company, for example, they're not going to go more than a few miles out. So if you enter the PPC game, and the client says, I want to cover all of South Florida, it's your job to step in and check. You have to politely check the client and say, Mr. Client, we know this is not going to be profitable. We take let's just use $1,000 as an example. We're going to take your $1,000 budget and we're going to spread it thin across 3 different counties, of which 2 out of the 3, you only generated $5,000 in revenue last year. That doesn't make any sense. PPC isn't going to magically make people from Miami want to work with a business in Fort Lauderdale over a business in Miami, right? So, I mean, there will be extenuating circumstances. Let's say you're some type of specialist, you're some type of doctor that you do, you're like a spinal surgeon of some type, and you're the best in the country. Yeah, people might fly in, and you could target other, areas. And of course, if we're talking about a nationwide business, it's totally different. You might target all 50 states. You might even do international targeting. There's companies that do that. But for a local business, we're talking more local, regional businesses, which very often are advertising in PPC. That's where, as a PPC consultant or PPC manager, you have to effectively guide the client and say, hey, all right, let's get a list together. Can you, this is me talking to the hypothetical client, do you have sales data that you can pull to show me what your top 10 cities or zip codes are historically in terms of sales? And a lot of times that's not a problem. The client can provide that type of data, or at least give you some ballpark idea of where they cover. They might say, listen, all right, yes, I wouldn't mind getting more customers from anywhere in South Florida. I'm willing to do it, but you know what, Justin, you're right. Most of our customers do come out of Broward County. 80% of our revenue, I would say, comes out of Broward County. So usually they'll tell you something like that. If, again, just using South Florida as an example. So you have to probe sometimes. You want to ask, where do you want to cover? But you also need to ask, where is most of your revenue coming from? What are your top areas? What are your top cities? What are your top zip codes and counties? Can you prioritize that list for me? And then take it from there. Because most often, your clients aren't coming to you and saying, hey, we have an unlimited budget. We don't mind just throwing money to Google and just, we don't mind if people click and they don't do business with us. Nobody's ever going to say that to you. So your clients are expecting you to do the very best with the money as possible. So that's why you have to ask those questions. The next thing, service and product wise, it's the same type of thing with diminishing returns with services and products. Meaning, and oh, by the way, geographically, that just means that the further away you go from home base for a local business, that's where the diminishing return comes in. So if you're a chiropractor and 90% of your business comes within 6 miles of your office, which a lot of times that happens for chiropractors, if you do PPC for 5 to 10 miles out, there'll be a little bit of a diminishing return. If you go further than 10 miles, there'll be a much greater diminishing return. So again, the highest return will be hitting that low-hanging fruit and helping to saturate that local market. And the same thing with products and services. So you find out, Mr. Client, what are the top products and services that you sell? What generates the most revenue? 90% of your revenue last year came from which products and services? Is it 3 or 4 different products and services? Is it 100? What is it? Can you provide a prioritized list? And then you want to kind of go from there and find out what's the bread and butter of that business, so to speak. That's generally what you want to target with PPC. Now, other benefits of PPC is you can test new markets, new products, new services. It's a great benefit, but you have to do that carefully, and there's no crystal ball to say that, hey, this company came up with this new service or product. There's no historical data from internally from a business standpoint as to what sells in that specific local market. You could help work with the client on what might be reasonable to expect, but there's that whole other business component and X variable that you don't know. So you have to talk to the client about what's realistic to expect. And again, diminishing return comes into play where you're going into the newer market. You're potentially looking at a diminishing return, going after products and services that are not within that pool of bread and butter products and services. So again, these are all things you have to potentially talk to the client about, make sure they understand when you're talking about goals for the campaign. So again, if the client's coming in, depending on what their budget level is and the type of business it is, you have to consult with that client and say, okay, let's talk about the game plan. What should our game plan be, Mr. Client? What are your thoughts? And then I come back as a PPC person. I've done my research. I have the data in front of me. I can see where people are searching for what. I know what the market demand is from a keyword and search standpoint. I talk to the business. We put that information together, and then we come up with a game plan that makes sense to make them successful. So again, diminishing returns, very important Very, very important to keep in mind when it comes to PPC. It's a phenomenon that absolutely exists, particularly when it comes to geographic targeting and things like that. So, definitely keep that in mind when you're setting up new campaigns or going through that intake process with the client. So if you have any questions, again, this is Justin Gross with Hop to the Top with the number 2. Feel free to reach out anytime if you just have a quick question about PPC, or if you have campaigns that you really feel like you don't have the time to properly manage. That's what we do. That's what we do best. So feel free to reach out for a consultation if that's the case. And my email is justin@hoptothetop.com. And I'll talk to you guys soon.